Let's use my solar powered water. I don't know if you guys know this, but you should be exposing your drinking water to indirect sunlight. Don't worry about it. Hashtag Gerald Pollock. Alright, so this is an okay germination. I blundered a couple things. I forgot the nuances of this particular desktop form of farming. It's been a while. And you can see there's ungerminated seeds here. And they're actually, if you look around, they're sporadically, here and there over there on this side. And that's because this is a process to avoid soaking the seeds. Normally, you're supposed to soak the seeds for like 6 to 9 hours. I didn't want to do that, and I developed this way to trap enough moisture and get enough. But I forgot one important thing you're supposed to do is something I developed later in this, little experiment route, is you got to fill the bottom with water. And you got to put your fertilizer in there and put water and the hydrogen peroxide and fill it up so that the water, you could just start seeing it bubble up you could see it under the paper towel. And that way, when you cover it, and then you spray it, and then when you cover it, there's not only enough moisture in their little microclimate here, because this is just wax paper, and you can just put it somewhere in sun that gets sunlight is even best, because they'll grow towards the light, but they'll also get warm, and it'll keep the humidity up. What was I going with it? The microclimate inside these little atmospheres, these little climates, the canopy, it's about keeping the seed coated in a thin layer of water, basically. At all times, you basically want to cover everything with the right humidity and temperature and pH, but it's like you have to think literally at the surface of the cell of the plant, what is going on right there. And then you figure out, okay, what do I want? And then how do I get that? And how to get that is the nightmare of vertical farming. That's the NAM, dude. This is the jungles of NAM. So, but decent growth. You can kind of see in the corner here, it's better than that corner. And that is, that probably had to do with the pitch of my floor and the angle of this thing, of the 1020 flat, because it's actually worse here and it's better here. And so this side is probably where the tilt was towards, and it got more moisture fundamentally. And that's the name of the game, because we're skipping that initial soaking period and just going straight into the planting. And we're just adding this as kind of the replacement for that, jar, if you will. But you have to keep the air in here, 100% humid. And so what happens if you don't put the water underneath, eventually your air just kind of leaks out a little bit and the humidity drops and they don't germinate. But when you have that reservoir of water, it dissipates a little bit, but it's just replaced. In fact, it might be pulled up. But if the material is not wet enough, the water can't go through this material. The material slows down the water moving from the bottom tray up through the top. And so again, you have to think about the molecular structure of the materials you're using. This is a semi-permanent membrane, and so you could imagine like a sponge. You can see inside the sponge, and you can kind of imagine how water would go through a sponge. It's the same thing for this. It's just super, super thin. Now, even though it's super thin to us, to water molecules, it's got a lot of, I don't know the number, but I would venture to say millions of layers of water molecule. That's a great question. That seems way too high for something a milliliter thick. I'll look into that and update you guys. I have no idea, but But you can imagine still it's slowing down the water molecules. And so if your water molecules are closer to the surface, aka the water line is like one with inside or at the same height as the middle of your fabric. I know that's a very precise measurement, but that's the truth. Then your water would take less effort to be pulled up, and so would replenish the air with this passive kind of, the water is just slowly leaking out the top and out the bottoms. So it's a very slow draw, maybe at the corners or whatever, at the edges, either way. And so it's a very light pull, right? Very light vacuum. And so if you have the water closer to the top, and so all you got to do is basically pour, you mix in with the water jug and you pour it in, and you just watch and you eyeball it, and then you get it on your flattest surface you can. And if you need to, just put a little wedge under it. That's a major component, by the way, of fucking vertical farming, is the level of the thing. And so on racks, on the material handling equipment we use, it's much more easily you can balance for the floor at a larger scale. But at home, it's kind of a pain in the ass. But you just got to make sure you get both your corners and your ledge up a little bit with like a ruler or a thin book or what have you. You don't want to put something right here and then you get this pitch and yaw or whatever it is, and then you get other messed up. So the uniformity of one flat, okay, Padawai, whatever, young Kenobi, one flat is critical to getting perfect, because if you can get one flat, then the question becomes, okay, how can we get a pallet full perfect? That's all. That's in the main, the middle hurdle, and then the question is, okay, how many pallets can we operate? It becomes less about what's going on in the system as opposed to what happens with the plants, and that's a whole nother hurdle. We've gotten over the one flat hurdle, and we've figured out the pallet hurdle. It is going to be we got to build our first farm to figure out everything we don't know and fine tune the operations to 10,000 square feet, and I keep coming to 10,000 square feet because that's kind of like a hard limit for the industry to break through. Vertical farming had a tough time. I never grew past 3,000 square feet, and it was because what's actually interesting though, real quick. The whole plant, so this is what we sell in your supplements. I should get a supplement to show you guys. But we literally, first we clean the seeds in a whole new natural way. Completely. Like real better than anything else on the market. And then we plant them and as dense as you can imagine. And then we germinate them to the day that our target molecule is at its peak in concentration in there. And then we switch immediately to drying and preserving, and then we powderize for storage and shipment and sale. And so we basically sell plant powders made of plants big, like this, give or take. But you have to grow so much of them to make it worth your while. Yeah. And it's insanely hard to do that clean and without destroying your target molecule, which is the main problem. Is why basically I found out down my rabbit hole is why supplements don't work, because they're either overly concentrated synthetics that are like carpet bombing your cells, wishing 10% get in, or they're whole plant or plant-based, which everyone in the industry knows jacks up your absorption immediately. If you have plant-based molecules, they all it's like a rule of thumb in the supplement ingredient industry, which is really the supplement industry. What you guys see on the consumer shelves is like just different packaging for all the stuff these other guys are actually growing and selling, making and selling and buying. But it's predominantly not plastic, but synthetic, chemical. And when you get 100% of your vitamin C, not all of that makes it in. Vitamin C is one of the better ones, and 20% I think make it in. So they give you 1,000%, so you get your 1,000 milligrams, so you get your 200 milligrams, and that's like 100% of your. That doesn't work for like many other supplements, and so most supplements they don't get absorbed, And when you grow stuff, it's well known the absorption rate historically generally goes up, and then in the lab when they show the absorption rate of whole plant supplements, meaning literally the plant ground up and provided, and measuring the amount of, I think it was manganese in the kelp, and then manganese in the mouse bone, rat thigh bone. What is the percentage, And they've done that for manganese, they've done it for vitamin C, vitamin A in apple skins, I think. A handful of others, right? And it's always super high absorption. You're like, what is going on? And fundamentally, the theory is I think the most popular, kind of scientific consensus is that these molecules have other molecules that help it get to where it needs to go. And it is insanely complicated just to track, and expensive, just to track one molecule through an organism. It takes so much cost. And, tracking 100 molecules through an organism is like too expensive, basically, especially for just like nutrition science. And you can see, just measuring a single drug molecule, well, maybe a half dozen ingredients in a drug, is insanely expensive. And so no one can really get an understanding of what the nutritional chemistry is really. Exactly. All of our science right now is a fucking estimate. I know it sounds precise, but when you get into it, it's all super estimatory, because it's a very accurate picture of a very small piece of the puzzle. And so it's surrounded by other phenomenon, other mechanisms, other physical, forces. And so you have to isolate it to the, core. We can't even compute, maybe now we can, but it's still impressive to compute the genomic activity in a single seed. The number of cells, the number of divisions. I mean, think about it. This can turn into an entire radish plant. And that's less impressive in many ways, sorry Mr. Radish, to a tree, right? A walnut tree has it grows physically, it copies itself physically from the seed. And that's impossible to comprehend. Just the static state, before all this stuff is turned into usable, more absorbent for the human body anyway, molecules. There's a store of fat and carbon and I'm sure there's multiple PhDs you can get on the different true contents of any given seed. And then the activation is really crazy. And then the crazy thing is, people sometimes talk about, it's really hard to learn about the mechanics of a seed, but I had to figure out, what is the surface of a seed look like on a molecular level, on an atomic level? What is happening, and how will things affected and unaffected? Under what conditions does it pop? Under what conditions does it die? Hell, what is it made out of, right? This is the insanity of being a hyper generalist. I have to solve whatever problem is keeping the business from working, and seed germination, immediate, when I'm trying to figure out how to optimize seeds, this is like the new problem. And this took years, by the way. By the way, I at least spent a year figuring out on a commercial level how to deal with the seeds. And all, fundamentally, the seed is what I would be working with every day with my hands, pounds and pounds of seeds. And I had two private farms, two research farms, very small but very mighty. And one was in the basement of a genetics laboratory in NCRC, North Carolina Research Center, which this story in and of itself is insane. The guy that started Dole Bananas, this Hawaiian billionaire, he lived out here, or no, his wife got cancer or a disease, and he became, God bless him, hyper focused on like healing her, and he wanted to know everything about nutrition and the latest science in like health and healing. And so he came out to North Carolina, and he basically built in an old town, Kannapolis, North Carolina. He took a giant he bought like a textile factory, enormous thing, like millions of square feet, not a skyscraper type, like just big old factory. He knocks that shit down. He puts a campus on there, and he pulls together like 8 different universities to have their master's programs in this area. And so it's sitting out there in Kannapolis. No one knows what to do with it. This guy bought it, and he's commercializing the IP out of it, and I love that for him. But these are like slow sales cycles, hype, I keep using the word hyper, but like deeply academic work. Takes a long, it's all manual, like this is real science, hard science. And I was just in the basement. They gave me some free space in an old it was an unused refrigerator. So this place had like insane buildings, the nicest academic buildings you could imagine. That was probably one of their faults. It ate way too much money. They thought that the nicer they made it look, the lab space, the more the academics would want to come there. And that wasn't, enough to bring them to Kannapolis, North Carolina, okay? Your beard can't get too thick in Kannapolis, North Carolina. They'll just get you. There is no, maybe there's a sheriff in Kannapolis, but he's real loose with the law, you understand me? And so the one coffee shop in Kannapolis, they poured a bunch of money into this thing we got this world-class research center, because people literally have to fly from India to come there. And then Kannapolis, which is like depressing western town, like the old west, out in the middle of nowhere. And they're gonna kill me for saying this. I love Kannapolis, but this is true. They put a minor league stadium there, and it's still not enough. No one wants to come to redneck Kannapolis. And why? Because when you go to the coffee shop, of course it's a vet's coffee shop, so it's all veteran, and I'm in there, I'm a patriotic American, but I look like an Iranian terrorist. And this is just the cruel twist of fate, because when I'm in a mental puzzle, all I do every day is walk around using my dumb brain, God bless it, my dumb self using my brain, my incredible brain, to figure out the next problem, the current problem. Bzz. All right, 12 problems at a time at any given time, easily. And there's more. I have to focus, right? But I get this scowl on my face because I am completely in another world, turning the Rubik's Cube over, trying to figure out how to make this fucking puzzle work, throwing everything at it. I am tenacious when it comes to problem solving, and I happen to tackle the world's hardest problems. I am the world's hardest problem solver. Sometimes God just gives you a layup. Anyway, uncomfortable just to get a cup of coffee in Kannapolis. But we were in the lab. They helped us. God bless them. Shout out to everyone up in Kannapolis. And but then the building moved and moved ownership, and so we had to move out. And so we moved to North Carolina, UNCC, University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And another dump. I'm not gonna lie to you. The most depressing, beautiful campus I've ever been on. Everything was there, just no soul. It's like they did something with the architecture again, where they made it. And I know some of the people involved in the planning, and I'm sorry, boomers, but the truth is, it's like too shiny looking for where it was, and it didn't create like you're building the whole city at once. I don't know if it's even possible to do it right. The best buildings seem to be built one at a time. The best cities, one building at a time. And so, I don't know. I was always on the far campus, away from the main campus. But even the couple times I walked through, or I tried to go to the gym in the early days, it was like really crazy, weird. But probably because I'm in my 30s and I'm an old man. That's probably most of it. Remember that, folks. It's just dawning on me that I'm getting old. But at UNCC, we did basically the time spent, it was like 2 years at NCRC, and we fucking God bless my business partner there, but he was a glorified janitor. God bless him, but he was basically a cartoonish buffoon. Have you heard of a bull in a china shop? That is what I had to deal with for like 4 to 5 years. And then in the end, he wrecked the china shop, and I had to start over from scratch. By the way, induced the midlife crisis. I was like, what did I just spend almost 20 years doing? We literally got to the point where I figured out everything, how to grow it, how to package it, how to sell it online, and he ruins the business. He basically shuts down the business. And I'm like, oh my God, I tried my hardest to recover, didn't work. All his friends, were involved, and they just immediately lost confidence. And I'm like, okay, this is insane. Couldn't manage. Some planes you can't rescue. So out of the rubble, I quit forever. I wrote a little memoir just to get my stories out. Because I realize now, I'm calling myself America's first commercial vertical farmer. And there was two guys before me. They were in the nonprofit space. And, but I was the first guy to this is a business. We're trying to grow fucking salads. Let's go. And we were using aquaponics back in the day. Oh, aquaponics. And so I designed this, imagine this is the floor plan. And there's 4 250-gallon fish tanks, and then 3 8-foot by 8-foot towers of 3 8-foot by 8-foot trays. And water goes from the 4 into a mixing tank, a large 500-gallon flat mixing tank. And then, because there's 2 systems here, basically. There's the recirculating aquaculture, and then there's the hydroponics. And they need different speeds, by the way, different circulation rhythms. So the water here had to be, basically the tanks are different sizes, the heights are different, and the volumes are different, I guess, fundamentally. And so you have to move different amounts of water. Anyway, for multitudes of reasons, this is 10 years ago. I can't remember all my reasoning, but I had a mixing tank. So the aquaculture would go and clean itself and dump fertilizer-rich water into the mixing tank. The hydroponic system would feed itself and basically clean fertilizer-rich water from the mixing tank. And the plants grew freakishly. Oh man, I got these lights. So in the towers here, I found these brand new technology in magnetic induction light bulbs, and these things, they were basically too expensive in the end, but they put out a spectrum of light that was so good and powerful. But then to basically make it was cheaper, and they do this in hydroponics all the time. A way to bring down costs is to put them on a track so they move, and then you get the same light interval. You just run your lights longer, and you get the same daily light interval on your canopy, but you don't need 4 stationary things, because they were $1,000 each. It was crazy, and they were enormous, and it was just like, oh, that company I think went under. But I was hunting for these parts. None of this existed. I was the first commercial vertical farmer, and I was using aquaponics. And I'm like, how the fuck do I do this? And then we got money all of a sudden from 2 degenerate gambling friends, brothers that were basically, what I put together is they were about to get sued for their gambling winnings, and they had to, but investing it would get it out of their hands. And so they basically wrote us, a check, and Lord, I tried. Lord, did I try. But I was also a little shit, and I ruined everything. So, but I was, fundamentally terrified. I'm like, oh my God, you guys probably feel this, the existential dread. Boomers have no idea what this following means. The existential dread of like some sort of impending climate, global, like geographic, some sort of Earth scale problem occurring. And they're like, la la la, life is like the 90s. They literally grew up, became conscious at the beginning of the single most like prosperous time in maybe perhaps the universe's history, certainly human history. And it was completely unsustainable. It came at the cost of our planet, our economy, our kids' future. It turns out you can't make jeans by the trillions and just like throw out the ones that don't sell every year in a Chinese landfill. It turns out you can't have entire logistics networks dedicated to moving globally, mind you, from hundreds of thousands of sources to hundreds of millions of consumers. It turns out you can't have an entire global logistics apparatus dedicated to moving cheap plastic shit that nobody needs and immediately disregards. All of the cheap plastic shit, every dollar store, the toy aisle, in every fucking retail outlet. Think about that one. I don't want to call anyone out on because everyone is doing this. The toy aisle is, if in every retail establishment is full of plastic shit. Bless you, honey. That's made as cheaply as possible. Oh, let me clean you up over. There's one here from the Oh, it gets me crazy. Hand on the Bible. Hand on the Bible. I gotta calm down. Because when you start, that's like not even the whole problem. Toys is just one vector. And it's this shit that this stuff is built at least to be like around plants, rugged, durable. The average plastic thing is just made to be completely disposable. So no one's using high quality shit, and the whole point is to use as low as you can. You can only afford to use so much. That's the truth of it. Because moving the damn thing is this insane orchestration, and it's like just the beginning of your problems is making the product. At most it's half your problems. At any rate, they're in everything. We're too focused on deporting